harassment, which is one of those significant crimes which impacts women every day?
Well, I'm very interested in both of those issues, the Right Honourable Lady will be pleased to know. In regard to the consultation on public sexual harassment, that's been completed and I'm looking at that currently. In regard to misogyny as a hate crime, I'm aware of the Nottinghamshire police work, and it's absolutely right that a number of police forces are choosing through their own volition to report those particular crimes, and I'll update the Honourable Lady further in writing because there is more to say.
Secretary Annalise Dodds.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr Speaker. And I'd first like to welcome the new Minister for Women and Equalities to her place. With reference to the previous question, of course, making misogyny a hate crime is something that the government has stood against until now, when it was pushed by a Labour Police and Crime Commissioner in Nottinghamshire. But we hope the tide may be turning. Now, the Minister a moment ago referred to some of the statistics on hate crime, but not the most concerning. One was mentioned by my friend: violent hate crime, 6 times higher today than 10 years ago. Also, hate crimes that are reported up by 269% in England and Wales since 2010, and the highest number of religiously motivated hate crimes ever recorded this year. What is the government going to do about this?
Yeah. Well, firstly, the Honourable Lady will know we have some of the strongest legislation to tackle everything that she's mentioned, including religious hate crime. And in fact, over the last 6 years, the Places for Worship Protective Security Funding Scheme from the Home Office has awarded 323 grants of around 8 million directly in regard to religious hate crime. But I'll be very clear, I'm personally committed to the best possible response by every force on hate crime.
Anna Bardell.
DWP's new progression offer will help claimants on universal credit identify opportunities in their current role or a new role. We've also increased the national living wage, reduced the universal credit taper rate and increased the work allowance to ensure work pays.
Anna Bardell.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. The current PM famously insulted millions of mums across the UK during the pandemic when he showed a total lack of understanding of the pressure they were under and the discrimination they faced in the workplace. It's probably lost on a billionaire PM, but his Tory government is overseeing the second most expensive childcare in the developed world. According to Pregnant Then Screwed, 62% of parents pay the same or more for childcare as their rent or mortgage, and now the cost of living crisis will only worsen that. What real action is she and the new Prime Minister going to take? And can she tell me, will she and he be in post long enough to actually do anything?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Childcare is an important issue. We've doubled the childcare to 30 hours since 2010 for working parents, with a universal offer of 15 hours and covering 85% of childcare costs under universal credit. We've also had much discussion in recent weeks about childcare ratios, and I'll assure the relevant minister writes to you with more detail.
Harriet Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. One workplace where women need support is actually the other place, where 1/8 of the seats are reserved for men only. Will the Minister support my hereditary peerages female succession bill and get this anomaly changed?
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for her question and her impressive campaigning on this issue. I was very privileged to be in the Chamber as she's made some of her speeches this year, and I will look into this issue and make sure I write to her about it.
We now come to Secretary Annalise Dodds.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Last month, the new Minister for Women and Equalities told investors in New York that the government was going for growth in a big way. She said of that economic strategy, and I quote, "We know it is bold, we know it comes with risk, but in these volatile times, every option, even the status quo, is risky." 1 month on from the catastrophic mini-budget, can the Minister explain what impact going for growth had on women's finances?
I thank the Honourable Lady for her question. We have been putting lots of cost of living support for families and for women in particular, and we'll write to her further about this issue.
Annalise Dodds.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm very disappointed by that brief response, because today we've found out from the latest statistics that women need over £12 times our average annual salary to buy a home. And our average real terms wages have plummeted by almost £600 a year since 2010. The government has simply removed the possibility of home ownership for millions of women. In her speech last month, the Minister described the UK as Europe's unicorn factory. Isn't her government Britain's chaos factory, with working women paying the price with lower wages and lost mortgages?
I would completely dispute that characterisation of this government. Not only has this government taken comprehensive steps to financially support people this year, targeting support of vulnerable households and families and putting in place an energy price cap, but also we've increased the national living wage, we've changed the universal credit taper rate, we've taken a number of steps to help people with their own finances and will continue to do so.
SNP spokesperson Kirsty Oswald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This Tory government has committed to an employment bill at least 20 times, but it's nowhere to be seen. And meanwhile, labour market inequalities become all the more acute, especially in this cost of living crisis. So the Minister could tell us she'll fix the sick pay system, introduce the day one right to flexible working, improve parental leave and pay, strengthen protections against pregnancy and maternity discrimination, but her government is making a choice not to do these things. It's a real contrast to the Scottish Government's recent Building a New Scotland paper, setting out how an independent Scotland would deliver fair working practices. So why does this Tory government support inequality in the workplace?
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for her question. I think actually the changes in flexible working that we saw in the pandemic have been helpful to the women. This government has taken action in consulting on flexible working. It is a matter for the Bays Department. I will ensure the relevant Minister writes to her about this issue.
Greg Smith.
Three, sir.
This government and I are absolutely committed to supporting women's sport at every opportunity, pushing for greater participation, employment, commercial opportunities and visibility in the media. We want to continue to work with stakeholders to ensure that all aspects of women's sport continue to flourish. I welcome the W Series in providing equal opportunities for women to compete competitively in motorsport, and I also recognise organisations such as Motorsport UK and the British Women Racing Drivers Club are taking forward to increase women and girls' participation within the sport.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to my honourable friend for that answer. As you said, the all-female W Series Championship is another jewel in the crown for British motorsport, won for the third time this year by British driver Jamie Chadwick, but has sadly had to curtail the season by 3 races, with the sad reality that women's sports like the W Series have much lower funding available than their male counterparts. Can my honourable friend commit to working with the W Series to help them continue to support women drivers, engineers and mechanics into motorsport?
My honourable friend is a fantastic champion for motorsport, and as he knows, I'm more than a little bit of a petrol head. I approach motorsport with an enormous amount of enthusiasm and almost no talent, which is probably the problem. I would also like to add my congratulations to Jamie Chadwick, because I did watch it and it was a phenomenal drive. It is disappointing that the season was cut short, Mr. Speaker, and we want the women's sport to thrive. The government is unable to intervene directly, but DCMS is working with the wider support sector on commerciality of women's sport and how it can be promoted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One way to encourage more women into motorsport, and indeed every job and every industry, is to make workplaces endometriosis friendly. 1 in 10 women have endometriosis. It has a huge impact on their workplace. What encouragement can the Minister give for companies to adopt the charity Endometriosis UK strategy to make all workplaces endometriosis friendly?
I couldn't agree with the Honourable Lady more. I think women's health issues are coming to the fore in the workplace, and whilst I don't have the level of detail to absolutely commit exact policy, I'll get the Department of Health to write to her about that.
Christine Jardine.
Number 4, please, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are committed to commencement of this provision of the Equality Act. Our consultation on the detail of implementation closed on the 18th of August 2022, and we are analysing responses before taking further steps. We expect to introduce regulations and prepare a comprehensive guidance prior to commencement in England and Wales in due course.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And can I say, can I welcome the Minister to her place? Can I say that access to public buildings is one of the issues which my constituents most often bring to me, because those who have a problem with accessibility feel they are excluded in many ways. And I know that in England and Wales there are almost 500,000 wheelchair users who are awaiting the results of the consultation for their own homes as much as for public buildings. So I welcome the Minister's statement, but can she assure us it won't be put aside in the recent chaos?
I thank the Honourable Lady for her question. This is something that we have committed to. Obviously, it's important to properly address the cost implications of implementation, given everything that's happening, and we'll do everything we can to further this piece of work.
Philip Hollowell.
Number 5, sir.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ensuring that everyone can access world-class education remains a priority. 2021 saw record HE progression rates for disadvantaged white students who had free school meals. This government is investing £3.8 billion more in high-quality education, skills and training provision, leading to good outcomes for young people and skills needed for economic growth, whichever good quality route that they choose.
On the government's own figures, the percentage of state school pupils getting a higher education place by ethnicity is Chinese 72%, Asian 55%, black 49%, mixed heritage 41% and white 33%. Is the government concerned about these widening disparities, and if so, what is it going to do to level up university entry?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a meritocrat, I don't believe in positive discrimination, but a society where people are judged on their character and ability. Access to HE should be based on a student's attainment and their ability to succeed rather than their background. Now, 2021 saw a record high number of white students who received free school meals progress onto higher education, as I said. But since then, since the report of the White Working Class Pupils Have Been Let Down report, we've tasked the Office for Students to refresh their entire access and participation and to look into this.
Question number 6, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For pupils with complex needs, high needs education funding is increasing by £1 billion in 2022 and 23 financial year, bringing total needs funding to £9.1 billion. The department also provides £27.3 million per annum to deliver grants to support low-income families raising disabled or seriously ill children and young people.
I very much welcome that answer and that support, but constituents who are parents of disabled children so often tell me that they feel it's like an obstacle race and there are so many hurdles put in their way to get the support they need for their children, both at home and at school. Can the government make it easier to access this essential SEND support?
My honourable friend raises an important question. Now, the SEND and AP Green Paper proposals aims to improve experiences and outcomes of children and young people with SEND and within a fairer and more sustainable system. We are investing £301.75 million jointly with the Department of Health and Social Care to transform Start for Life and family support services in 75 local authorities across England.
The worst cost of living crisis in memory, it is becoming increasingly difficult for parents to provide important life experiences for their children. Springfield House in Birmingham is a wonderful SEND school which many students across Coventry North West attend. For many years now, they've provided away nights for pupils, giving children the chances to spend time away from home with their peers in a safe environment. Now, because of government cuts, this away night is being axed. So will the Minister speak to her counterparts in the Department of Education to ensure that families in Coventry do not lose this much-needed service?
I thank the honourable lady. The government's doing some amazing work, and if I can just point her and constituents from across the House to a fantastic website that we have, which is governmentsupport.co.uk, where it demonstrates the great services open to people who are having difficulties at the moment.
The topicals, Sarah Green, topicals.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I recently met...
Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted to have been appointed as Minister for Women and Equalities. As the Prime Minister said yesterday, this government will bring compassion to the challenges we face, put people's needs above politics and reach out to communities across the country. My priority will be delivering our groundbreaking Inclusive Britain strategy, our cross-government work to improve the lives of disabled people and breaking down barriers to opportunity for people from all backgrounds up and down the UK.
Thank you for that answer, Mr. Speaker. I recently met with the chair of the Cheshire Mosque Committee, who'd recently been told that the medical examiners in our area will only be available 5 days a week and not at the weekend, which will cause significant problems for our Muslim and other religious communities who buried their loved ones as soon as possible following a death. Will the Secretary of State meet with me and my constituent to find a way forward to ensure the new system does not infringe the rights of religious communities?
Mr. Speaker, I didn't fully hear the question, but I think if she wrote to me in more detail about what she required, I'd be able to follow up in better detail.
Vital fabricants.
Tropical tooth, sir.
Well, just give the question.
Oh, sorry. I didn't know he got on to topical. So, back in the 1990s, a colonel in the Royal Marines once said to me, he would rather have a gay Marine alongside him who can shoot straight than a straight Marine who can't. Now, my right honourable friend will know that there was much persecution of gay people in the armed forces. Can she update us on how the LGBT Independent Veterans Review is getting on?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend for that question. I can tell him that under Lord Etherton as chair, this important and independent review has launched a call for evidence on the experiences of LGBT veterans who served between 1967 and 2000, when LGBT people were barred from openly serving in the armed forces.
Vicky Bolscroft.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Why was the post of Minister for Disabled People demoted? What message do we think that this sends to disabled people who already feel like an afterthought from this government? And will the government reverse this decision immediately?
This continues to be an important ministerial post in government. The Secretary of State will have strategic oversight, but let me leave the lady in no doubt about how important this issue is to this government. 1.3 million more people in work, billions more in funding for children with SEND needs, a new BSL Act, Down Syndrome Act and special rules for end of life. This continues to be a very important area to this government.
Virginia Crosby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm delighted that Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm delighted that two entrepreneurs, Janet Percival from Jaspel Cider and Stacey Chadfield from Emberwood Creative, will be coming to Westminster as part of the Savitas MP Heroes initiative. Does my honourable friend agree with me that our entrepreneurs are the backbone of our economy, particularly in places like Unismorn?
With family on the island, running businesses, including my own, I absolutely support the work that the Savitas MP Heroes have done with businesses based in Llangefni and Aberfour. I mean, it's a wonderful part of the island. Celebrating female enterprises across all of areas of the UK, and I particularly would like to take this opportunity to thank Helen Martin-McGee in particular for her excellent work in this area. And I'm also delighted to announce to date that 40% of start-up loans issued by this government have gone to female entrepreneurs.
Rosanara Ali.
Mr. Speaker, the Women's Budget Group analysis shows 100,000 lone parents, mainly women, 200,000 children, will be forced into poverty if the government raises benefits in line with average wages rather than inflation. Can ministers confirm that they will push the Chancellor to uprate benefits in line with inflation so women are not forced into further hardship because of the government's economic incompetence?
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Lady, we know we don't make fiscal policy during equalities questions. She will have to wait for the Chancellor to give a statement to get an answer to it.
The government has an excellent opportunity to grant investment zones in South East Cornwall. What work is the government doing to ensure equality of opportunity for those investors?
The Honourable Lady is a role model to all of those female entrepreneurs in her constituency. With clear investment zone expressions of interest by different areas, we'll make sure I account for equality of opportunity in their country.
This government recognises that a diverse and inclusive business ecosystem is good for investors, entrepreneurs, businesses and her society.
Dame Angela Edel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's widely acknowledged that public spending cuts impact most on women. The Chancellor has signalled that he will be seeking such cuts in an effort to close the £40 billion hole his predecessor recklessly blew in the public finances. So will the Equalities Minister now undertake to publish an equality impact assessment on the November the 17th autumn statement as required by the Equality Act?
Mr. Speaker, we will be taking all due assessments on fiscal statements as we regularly do over the course of the period.
All men on!
The government rightly wants to see more disabled people in employment, but what more can the Minister say about encouraging in-work progression for those with a disability and, most importantly, getting more disabled representation on company boards to drive wider cultural change in business?
Well, I thank my honourable friend who's always been a passionate advocate for compassionate conservatism. We are looking at this issue very carefully. We're going to accept all the recommendations of the Homes Review for public appointments, and I would point them in the direction of the DWP progression work that we are doing.
Alex Davis-Jones.
Mr. Speaker, next week we come together to recognise National Fertility Week. Yesterday I had the great opportunity to meet with Fertility First, who are a fantastic charity providing information to everyone who requires fertility treatment. What more can the Minister do to ensure we get fair and equal access to fertility treatment for everyone who needs it in the UK?
I thank the Honourable Lady for raising that. That's something that I'd be very happy to meet with her to discuss in due course. She will know I've only returned to the role for a few hours, so I don't have a full answer for her, but I'm very happy to work with her on the issue.
Richards.
Mr. Speaker, what is the Secretary of State's response to the allegations made yesterday following her appointment by Ben Cohen of Pink News?
Mr. Speaker, if I may, I know everyone wants to start PMQs very quickly, so please forgive me if my answer is a tad longer than it ordinarily would be. I'm afraid that this particular individual is someone who uses Twitter as a tool for defamation. He has even sued people in this House, like the Honourable Member for Edinburgh West. And I think what is, he's been sued by, pardon me, the Honourable Member for Edinburgh West. What I would like to say, Mr. Speaker, as we do begin a new era of equalities, is that the Equality Act is a shield, not a sword. It is there to protect people of all characteristics, whether they're young or old, male or female, black or white, gay or straight. We are running a compassionate equality strategy, and we should not be distracted by people who use Twitter as a way to insult or accuse members of Parliament.
Before we come to Prime Minister's questions, I'd like to point out the British Sign Language interpretation of proceedings is available to watch on Parliament Live TV. We start with questions to Prime Minister. In welcoming the Prime Minister, I call Dr Alan Whitehead.
Question one, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker,
Can I just say, don't damage the furniture. Cheer him by all means, but don't damage. Come on.
Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
I'd like to congratulate the Prime Minister on his new post, and indeed as being the first Prime Minister of a South Asian heritage, which will be a cause of great pride among many of my constituents. I also have some pride in welcoming a fellow Saints Southampton supporter into number 10. During his prime ministerial campaigns, the last prime ministerial campaign he ran, he pledged to prohibit any development of onshore wind, which is now the cheapest form of power available to us in the country. Now he is Prime Minister. Will he change his mind on that point?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable gentleman for his kind words and look forward to seeing him at St Mary's. Although I know my friend, the Leader of the House, may have something to say about our love of saints. Look, when it comes to energy policy, I stick by what we said in our manifesto, Mr. Speaker. The important thing is, though, to focus on our long-term energy security. That means more renewables, more offshore wind, and indeed more nuclear. That's what this government will deliver.
I'm surprised, Mr. Speaker, to be asking a question, and I know you're shocked, Mr. Speaker, too, because I know that you, like many people, thought I would have already been offered a ministerial post.
Let me tell you, I didn't hold my breath. Philip Davis.
Go figure, as Joe Biden might say. Can I congratulate my right honourable friend on becoming Prime Minister? He's absolutely the right person for the job, and I wish him every success in post, and as he knows, he's got my full support. His two immediate predecessors made levelling up a key part of their agenda. Would he reaffirm his commitment to levelling up and start, as he means to go on, by approving the Levelling Up Fund bid for Bingley in my constituency?
Well, I'm grateful to my honourable friend for his warm remarks. I can confirm he must be the only person, Mr. Speaker, who texted me to say that he did not want a job in the last 24 hours. But I can give him my cast-iron commitment to levelling up, particularly in Yorkshire, which he and I share. Obviously, he'll know I can't comment on individual bids, but by the end of the year, an announcement is expected on the success, and I wish him every luck with that.
Let's come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and may I welcome the Prime Minister. The first British Asian Prime Minister is a significant moment in our national story. And it's a reminder that for all the challenges we face as a country, Britain is a place where people of all races and all beliefs can fulfil their dreams. That's not true in every country, and many didn't think that they would live to see the day when it would be true here. It's part of what makes us all so proud to be British. Was his Home Secretary right to resign last week for a breach of security?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I thank the honourable gentleman for his kind and indeed generous welcome to the dispatch box. I look forward to Prime Minister's question time with him, and I know that we will have, no doubt, robust exchanges, but I hope that they can also be serious and grown up. So I look forward to it. Well, he asked about the Home Secretary. The Home Secretary made an error of judgment, but she recognised that. She raised the matter and she accepted her mistake. And that's why I was delighted to welcome back into a united cabinet that brings experience and stability to the heart of government. And let me tell you, Mr. Speaker, what the Home Secretary will be focused on. She'll be focused on cracking down on criminals, on defending our borders, while the party opposite remains soft on crime and in favour of unlimited immigration.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Prime Minister stood on the steps of Downing Street and promised integrity, professionalism and accountability. But then, with his first act, he appointed a Home Secretary who was sacked by his predecessor a week ago for deliberately pinging around sensitive Home Office documents from her personal account. Far from soft on crime, I ran the Crown Prosecution Service for 5 years. I worked with Home Secretaries to take on terrorists and serious organised crime. And I know firsthand how important it is that we have a Home Secretary whose integrity and professionalism are beyond question. So, have officials raised concerns about his decision to appoint her?
Mr. Speaker, I just addressed the issue with the Home Secretary, but he talked about fighting crime. I would hope, Mr. Speaker, I would hope that he would welcome. I would hope that as we look forward, he would welcome the news today that there are over 15,000 new police officers on our street. And the Home Secretary will be supporting them to tackle burglaries. While the party opposite will be backing the lunatic protesting fringe that are stopping working people going about their lives.
Keir Starmer.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I listened carefully. That was clearly not a no. We can all see what's happened here. He's so weak, he's done a grubby deal, trading national security because he was scared to lose another leadership election. There's a new Tory at the top, but as always with them, party first, country second. Yesterday, on the steps of Downing Street, he also admitted what the whole country knows. The Tories have crashed the economy, and now somebody has to pay for their mess. I say it shouldn't be working people who've been hammered time and again by this lot, but those with the broadest shoulders must step up. Does he agree?
No. Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman talked about party first and country second. Perhaps he could explain to us why it was a few years ago he was supporting the member for Islington North. Mr. Speaker, my record is clear. When times are difficult in this country, I will always protect the most vulnerable. That is the values of our compassionate party. We did it in COVID and we will do that again.
Mr. Speaker, he says he'll protect the most vulnerable. Let's test that. The government currently allows very rich people to live here but register abroad for tax purposes. I don't need to explain to the Prime Minister how non-dom status works. He already knows all about that. It costs the Treasury £3.2 billion every year. Why doesn't he put his money where his mouth is and get rid of it?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I have been honest. We will have to take difficult decisions to restore economic stability and confidence. And my honourable friend, the Chancellor, will set that out in an autumn statement in just a few weeks. But what I can say, as we did during COVID, we will always protect the most vulnerable. We will do this in a fair way. But what I can say, I am glad, Mr. Speaker, that the party opposite, honourable gentleman, has finally realised that spending does need to be paid for. It is a novel concept for the party opposite. This government is going to restore economic stability, and we will do it in a fair and compassionate way.
I know he's been away for a few weeks, but he should have listened to what's been going on the last two. But anyway, I have to say, I'm surprised he's still defending non-dom status. He pretends he's on the side of working people, but in private he says something very different. Over the summer, he was secretly recorded at a garden party in Tunbridge Wells, boasting to a group of Tory members that he personally moved money away from deprived areas to wealthy places instead. Rather than apologise or pretend that he meant something else, why doesn't he now do the right thing and undo the changes that he made to those funding formulas?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know the right honourable gentleman rarely leaves North London. But if he does, he will know that there are deprived areas in our rural communities, in our coastal communities, and across the south, and this government will relentlessly support them, because we are a government that will deliver for people across the United Kingdom. But Mr. Speaker, he mentioned the last few weeks. I am the first to admit that mistakes were made, and that's the reason I am standing here. But that is the difference between him and me. This summer, I was talking I was being honest about the difficulties that we were facing. But when he ran for leader, he promised his party he would borrow billions and billions of pounds. I told the truth for the good of the country. He told his party what it wanted to hear. Leadership is not selling fairy tales. It is confronting challenges, and that is the leadership the British people will get from this government.
Mr. Speaker, I think everyone should watch the video and make their own minds up. In public, he claims he wants to level up the north, but then he boasts about trying to funnel vital investment away from deprived areas. He says one thing and does another. But they're shouting. They're not my words. They're not my words. They're the words of the former chair of the Tory party, sacked yesterday for telling the truth about the Prime Minister. Even his own side know he's not on the side of working people. That's why the only time he ran in a competitive election, he got trounced by the former Prime Minister, who herself got beaten by a lettuce. So why doesn't he put it to the test, let working people have their say and call a general election?
Well, it'll take a long time to get through this paper if we carry on like this, Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, he talks about mandates, about votes, about elections. It's a bit rich coming from the person who tried to overturn the biggest democratic vote in our country's history. Our mandate is based on a manifesto that we were elected on, to remind him an election that we won and they lost. A mandate that says we want a stronger NHS, better schools, safer streets, control of our borders and levelling up. That is the mandate that I and this government will deliver for the British people.
Heather's not even answering questions. You want more? Come on, Heather.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to congratulate my right honourable friend and new Prime Minister, and also to thank our previous Prime Minister for the straightforward way she has handled her resignation, and I wish her and her family well for the future. Would my right honourable friend please use this, his first appearance of the dispatch box, to make it clear to the British Medical Council and the British Dental Association that, as well as more training spaces opening up, that they must allow new doctors and dentists to work in the UK so that the good people of South Derbyshire can get treatment on the NHS.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for her question. She's absolutely right. I'm pleased that there are 3,500 more doctors and over 9,000 more nurses working this year than last. But she's right, and we are working to simplify the registration for dentists in particular that are not trained here to practice here, and that's how we'll help deliver a long-term workforce plan for the NHS and ensure everyone can get the care they need.
Let's come to the leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I congratulate the new Prime Minister on becoming the first British Asian to hold the office. The significance and the symbolism of this achievement is to be warmly welcomed by everyone. Mr. Speaker, yesterday on the steps of Downing Street, the new Prime Minister promised to bring, and I quote, compassion to the challenges that we face today. So, on his first full day in the job, let's put that to the test. A winter of uncertainty is coming, and next April we'll see a cliff-edge moment. Millions face a double whammy as the energy price guarantee is cut off, while households are hit by austerity 2.0 and a real terms cut to social security benefits that many rely on to survive. If people are actually to trust the new Prime Minister's words about compassion, will he today reassure people and guarantee that benefits will rise in line with inflation in his upcoming budget?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thank the right honourable gentleman for his, again, kind remarks. And what I can tell him is my record on this is clear. Through the difficult times that we faced in this country through COVID, I always acted in a way to protect the most vulnerable. That's because it is the right thing to do, and those are the values of our compassionate party. And I can absolutely reassure him and give him that commitment that we will continue to act like that in the weeks ahead.
Blackford.
Well, Mr. Speaker, let's test that, because as Chancellor, the Prime Minister slashed universal credit and presided over the worst levels. Well, you know, for the hard of hearing on the Tory side, I might remind them that universal credit was cut by £20 a week and presided over the worst levels of poverty in North West Europe. So I hope that he has learned from his mistakes and guarantees that benefits will rise in line with inflation. But speaking of mistakes, yesterday the Prime Minister appointed a Home Secretary who was forced to resign only last week for breaching the ministerial code, and who boasted that she dreamed of sending vulnerable asylum seekers to Rwanda. We all know why he appointed her: a sleazy backroom deal to shore up his own position. Far from being a fresh start, this is a return to the sleaze and scandal and ghosts of cabinets past. The Prime Minister promised to govern with integrity and humility. So if he has an ounce of either, will he admit his mistake and sack the Home Secretary without the delay?
Mr. Speaker, I was pleased to actually have a call last night with the First Minister of Scotland. It was important that I spoke to her on my first day in office, because I wanted to express my desire to work constructively with the Scottish Government so that we can work together to deliver for the people of Scotland, and that is what I plan to do. And indeed, I hope crime is one of the things that we can collaborate on, because he will know that violent crime is rising in Scotland and police numbers are falling, whereas here we are increasing police numbers, Mr. Speaker. But I look forward to working with the Scottish Government on our shared challenges, because I believe in a strong United Kingdom.
Dr. Andrew Marissa.
Mr. Speaker, what a pleasure it was to welcome the Prime Minister to my constituency in the summer. He will know one of the burning issues in my constituency is the proposed waste incinerator at Westbury. With the government rightly reviewing its air quality targets, can I ask my right honourable friend to signal his intent to continue promoting public health, net zero and the environment by placing a moratorium on any more unwanted, unnecessary, toxic waste burners?
Prime Minister. I can tell my honourable friend, I know he's been a vociferous campaigner on this issue, as I learned over the summer. He'll know that local authorities determine these issues, but also to reassure him that all large incinerators in England must comply with strict emission limits and only receive permits if plants don't cause any damage to human health, and hopefully that is reassuring for him.
Caroline Lucas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister's reckless predecessor took a wrecking ball to nature, prompting millions of members of the RSPB, the National Trust and the Wildlife Trust to rise up in opposition. Yesterday, he promised to fix her mistakes, as well as to uphold the party's 2019 manifesto. So if he is a man of his word, will he start by reversing the green light she gave to fracking, since it's categorically not been shown to be safe, and instead maintain the moratorium that was pledged in that very manifesto that he has promised to uphold?
Well, I've already said I stand by the manifesto on that, but what I would say is that I'm proud that this government has passed the landmark Environment Act, putting more protection for the natural environment than we've ever had, with a clear plan to deliver. And I can give the honourable lady my commitment that we will deliver on all those ambitions. We will deliver on what we said at COP, because we care deeply about passing our children an environment in better state than we found it ourselves.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too would like to welcome the Prime Minister to his place. Farmers in my constituency of Clwyd South are delighted that after 20 years they are once more able to sell Welsh lamb to the US market. Would the Prime Minister comment on the size and prospects of this market
Mr. Speaker, I congratulate my colleague on the fantastic achievement. I can tell him that market is worth, I think, something like almost £40 million over the first few years. Enormous boost for our lamb farmers. I would just encourage the 300 million US consumers to give Yorkshire Swaledale a lamb a look in as well. But I know he and I, if we disagree on that, are united on the fact that we will unequivocally back British farming and British farmers.
Janet Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is certainly a topsy-turvy Tory government. A few days ago, I was going to put my question to the former Prime Minister. But my inbox has been full of emails from constituents of Lewisham East writing to me about their desperate situation of their wages simply not going far enough. I'm also receiving emails about rents going up, energy prices going up, mortgages going up, and of course the cost of living is already up. This week, my constituents are writing to me demanding a general election, and I absolutely agree with them. So can the Prime Minister tell me and my constituents when there will be a general election?
Mr. Speaker, we've already addressed that, but I would say, as I said in the summer, I said inflation is indeed the enemy. It makes everyone poorer, it erodes savings, and that's why it will be a priority of our government to grip and reduce inflation and provide support to those who need it, as we do.
Ms Braverman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This autumn, I'm launching my campaign to extend the Chilterns area of natural beauty across thousands of acres of scenic beauty, chalk streams and valuable habitats that happen to surround the wonderful town of Hitchin in my constituency. Would the Prime Minister join me in celebrating areas protected by AONB status and indeed support my campaign to potentially extend them in rural Hertfordshire?
Well, I thank my honourable friend, because I know this is a matter of great importance to him and his constituents, and he's right to highlight the benefit that natural parks and AONBs can bring to our lives and our well-being. I understand, actually, that Natural England is considering an extension of the Chilterns area of outstanding natural beauty, and I know my honourable friend will be vigorously taking up his campaign with them.
Richard Bargett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I welcome the Prime Minister to his place. A nurse would have to work over 20,000 years in order to match the vast wealth of this Prime Minister. The Prime Minister knows only too well that the super-rich could easily afford to pay more in taxes. So rather than announce a new wave of cuts and austerity, wouldn't it be fairer for the Prime Minister to introduce wealth taxes on the very richest in our society?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we will always support our hard-working nurses, and that's why, as Chancellor, we reintroduced the nurses' bursary and provided more training and introduced, actually, very strong pay increases. But as I committed to previously, as we approach the difficult decisions that confront us, we will do so in a way that is fair and is compassionate, because those are our values, and that's what we will deliver.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome my right honourable friend's determination to be straight with people about the challenges we face as a country. Last week, the Care Quality Commission State of Care report and State of Care in England showed our health system in gridlock. And I hear the same from my constituents, struggling to see a GP or waiting for treatment. So can I urge him to make unblocking the NHS a priority for him and his Health Secretary?
My honourable friend knows this subject obviously very well from her own experience, and I thank her for the work she did previously in the department. She's absolutely right about the challenge that confronts us. It's why we've put billions of pounds into busting the backlogs and the elective recovery fund, and are delivering funding and staffing to do that. But I look forward to working with her to deliver what we said in our manifesto, and that is a far stronger NHS.
Alan Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd add my own congratulations to the Prime Minister on his appointment. We might not agree on everything, but I think we can all agree a more diverse politics can only be to the good. Now, we in these benches believe that Scotland's best future is independence in Europe. Keep it coming. Mr. Speaker, I really would urge the members opposite to show a little more respect just us. It's not just us. It's not just the SNP, and I will not be shouted down. It's not just the SNP. On the last opinion poll, 72% of the people of Scotland want back into the European Union. So if the Prime Minister is to maintain any credibility in the eyes of the people of Scotland, how long does he think he can deny Scotland's democracy?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable gentleman for his kind words. I mean, he talked about respect. I would gently urge him to respect the result of the referendum we had on this topic. But whilst we will disagree on that issue, I can tell him that I do remain committed to working constructively in partnership with the Scottish Government to deliver for the people of Scotland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week I visited worried Year 3 and 6 pupils to hear their suggestions to tackle road safety, following a number of serious road accidents outside Boothroyd Academy in Dewsbury. They suggested the council should do more to help, that their parents should walk them to school to reduce traffic, and that commuters should slow down. Would my right honourable friend agree with me and with them that we all have a part to play in ensuring road safety outside our schools?
Can I say to my honourable friend, I think it's fantastic that he's engaging with his younger constituents at Boothroyd Academy on such an important issue, and I know they will welcome his commitment to supporting them. And I agree with him. There are various things we can do. There's an updated highway code which strengthens pedestrian access. Local authorities can introduce lower speed limits, and we're increasing the number of school streets which restrict motorised traffic at busy times. And I look forward to hearing progress on this issue from him.
Stephen Kinnock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, the Prime Minister stood on the steps of Downing Street and said that he wanted to restore trust. Yet in the past 24 hours, we've seen that he's prepared to shamelessly swap red boxes for political support. And there are real serious consequences to all this horse trading. So I'd like him to be clear on this point. Did he seek or receive any advice on security concerns about the Right Honourable Member for South Staffordshire before his appointment to the government yesterday, given that he was sacked in 2019 for leaking sensitive information relating to our national security?
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, he's talking about events that happened 4 years ago, and he's right that he raised the topic of national security, because members opposite 4 years ago were busily supporting the member for Islington North, who wanted to abolish the nuclear deterrent, who wanted to leave NATO, and who wanted to scrap our armed forces. We won't take any lectures on national security, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I sincerely congratulate my right honourable friend and wish him every success. Over 3 years ago, my constituent Harry Dunn was killed in a tragic road accident, and I'd like to ask my right honourable friend to join me in congratulating Harry Dunn's family for the incredible campaign they've run for over 3 years, with huge support from all colleagues across the House on finally achieving justice for Harry.
Well, I pay tribute to my right honourable friend for her role, and indeed the former Foreign Secretary as well, and indeed colleagues from all over the House for the part they've played in bringing about this outcome. My thoughts are obviously with the family, and I join in her sentiments that this is very welcome.
Daisy Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. West Hertfordshire Hospital Trust in my area is still hoping to receive funds from the new hospitals programme, the same programme that is supposed to deliver the government's so-called 40 new hospitals. There's been a lot of speculation that the new Prime Minister and his Chancellor might seek to cut infrastructure projects. So can the Prime Minister confirm to me that my local hospital trust, as well as all of the other local hospital trusts that are set to benefit from the new hospitals programme, will in fact get that money? Yes or no?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Chancellor will set out our plans in the autumn statement shortly, but this is the government that put in place plans which will remain to significantly increase capital expenditure, and even though difficult decisions do need to be made, I think the country can rest assured that we will continue to invest in our future productivity and indeed invest in our public services like the NHS.
Wendy Moulton.
Mr. Speaker, in my Brownhill's constituency, we're at risk of 8,000 new homes being dumped in the constituency. Will my right honourable friend use the opportunity of this Prime Minister's question to reaffirm the government's commitment to protecting the Greenbelt and to adopting a really rigorous brownfield first policy?
Well, can I say thank you to my honourable friend for her question, and I can give her that assurance. She's absolutely right. We must protect our green belt, and we are adopting a brownfield first strategy. I'm pleased we had a record number of new homes built in the last year, but it's important that we build those homes in the right places.
Luke Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Whilst welcoming the new Prime Minister to his place, we remember that law-breaking was the order of the day in Downing Street during the pandemic. We will never forget that this current Prime Minister was fined by the police for attending a birthday party hosted by his next-door neighbour. As both a witness and a participant to that law-breaking, if the Privileges Committee investigation into the former Prime Minister calls him to give evidence, will he fully cooperate?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, of course, and I addressed these matters earlier this year.
Michael Fabricant.
Mr. Speaker, you will know that I fought hard to bring back Boris. In '97, I campaigned for Kenneth Clarke and then for Michael Portillo. So I can't always get it right. But you know, I do know about the West Midlands. I know that the West Midlands Mayor very much welcomes the reappointment of the Levelling Up Secretary, and that he looks forward to working with our new Prime Minister. So may I just ask him, what is his vision for levelling up?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for the question, and what I can say is our desire is to ensure that people, wherever they live in our fantastic country, have enormous pride in the place they call home and every opportunity to succeed. And you know what? It is the fantastic Mayor Andy Street who is delivering that for his constituents in the West Midlands.
That completes questions. Right, let us come to the urgent question. I call the Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. To ask a question to the Home Secretary about her resignation and reappointment.
Gone away.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was disappointed in leaving my last department last night that I'd no longer be seeing the Right Honourable Lady across the dispatch box. I'm so glad she's put that right for me today. She's got a good memory, and as I know she'll recall from last week, that my honourable friend, the member for Bassett Law, said in responding to the question tabled by the Right Honourable Lady, the questions relating to breaches of the ministerial code or related issues are a matter for the Prime Minister and the Cabinet Office, not the Home Office, which is why I'm here, Mr. Speaker, answering the question today, and not the Home Secretary. Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend, the member for Bassett Law, set out the circumstances regarding the departure of the Home Secretary last week. The Home Secretary made an error of judgment. She recognised her mistake. She took responsibility for her actions. The Ministerial Code allows for a range of sanctions where mistakes have been made. The Home Secretary recognised her mistake, raised the matter and stepped down. Her resignation was accepted by the then Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Right Honourable Lady will be aware ministerial appointments are a matter solely for the Prime Minister as the Sovereign's principal adviser on the appointment, dismissal and acceptance of resignations of ministers. The Prime Minister was very clear in his speech to the nation yesterday that this government will have integrity, professionalism and accountability at every level. He has said he will work day in, day out to earn the trust of the country and to live up to the demands and expectations the public rightly have of their Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister expects all ministers to uphold the values and standards set by the ministerial code, as the public would rightly expect. As I set out, the Home Secretary made an error of judgment. She recognised her mistake. She took accountability for her actions in stepping down. After consideration, the PM has decided, given the apology issued by the Home Secretary, to reappoint her to the government. They are now focused together on working to make our streets safer and to control our borders. But while we should learn from mistakes, we should also look to the future. The Prime Minister has appointed a team of ministers to lead this country through the issues the country faces. All ministers are bound by the ministerial code, and the Prime Minister expects his ministers to uphold the code and hold the highest standards. As I've noted, the ministerial code allows for a range of sanctions of breaches, and on the recommendation of the Committee on Standards in Public Life, the code was updated in May to make this clear. On an ongoing basis, we will need every minister, through our actions and in how we conduct ourselves, to demonstrate that we can continue to command this Prime Minister's confidence as we tackle the huge challenges of the country to come.
Yvette Cooper.
What you like.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My questions are about security breaches and the protection of our national security. They are questions to the Home Secretary, who was here just 5 minutes ago and who left. Yesterday, the Prime Minister promised integrity, professionalism and accountability, yet they've discarded the ministerial code, reappointed someone who breached core professional standards and has now run away from basic accountability to this House. It is the same old Tory chaos and it is letting the country down. So I have questions for the Home Secretary that the government needs to answer. The Home Secretary accepted she sent an official document via her personal email to someone who was not authorised to see it. Is this the only time she has done this? Or has she shared other documents or other sensitive information? The Home Secretary is responsible for national security. So, has the Home Office, Cabinet Office or Security Service now undertaken an investigation into her security breaches to see how many others there have been? And can I urge him to make sure that happens urgently? What security clearance has the Home Secretary been given? Does she still have access to the most sensitive documents and information? And did the Cabinet Secretary warn against her reappointment? She has been Home Attorney General. She's been a minister on and off for 4 years, so she knows the rules about government documents. Yet she sent one to her own private email to someone outside the government and also copied it by accident to someone else entirely. How is anyone supposed to believe she is such a novice that she didn't know exactly what she was doing? And if she really is that much of a novice, why on earth are the rest of us supposed to trust her with our national security? And it's been reported that she sent this as an error of judgment because she was tired after going on an early morning raid. Well, is the Home Office supposed to just block her phone and her emails if she's been up half the night because she might do stupid things while she is tired? And there are suggestions that the Home Secretary was, while she was Attorney General, was investigated for a leak of information relating to the security service. Is that true? The Home Office, the Minister is a former policing minister. Does he think that if police officers breached their code of ethics and were sacked or forced to resign, they should then be reappointed to their jobs 6 days later because they said sorry? Or is it just one rule for the Cabinet and another for everyone else? Everyone knows this was a grubby deal to get a coronation to put party before country. But national security is too important for this.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has made clear that this government will act with professionalism, integrity and accountability. That is exactly what this government will be doing. I cannot comment, Mr. Speaker, as the Right Honourable Lady will be aware, on what the Cabinet Secretary may or may not do. That is a matter for the Cabinet Secretary. On the speculation that she raised, I'm not going to comment on speculation either. The Right Honourable Lady would not expect me to do so. At the end of the day, it's very simple. The Home Secretary made a mistake. She's acknowledged that she made a mistake. she offered her resignation and she stood down. The Prime Minister has looked again, and the Prime Minister has decided, as is his decision, that she can return to government. I believe in redemption. I hope the Right Honourable Lady can as well. And she is busy today, as she will be, doing the job of the Home Secretary, keeping our borders secure, helping the police to do their job. And I'm sure the Right Honourable Lady welcomes, as I do, the fact that we have now over 15,000 additional police officers delivering day in, day out for the country. That is what you can rely upon this government to do.
Sir Bernard.
Can I remind my right honourable friend that I recall that Tony Blair had to remove one of his very senior and trusted ministers for a breach of the ministerial code, and later reappointed him to the government. I think what the public will respect is the fact that we have a system that holds ministers accountable for breaches of the code, but that there is learning from mistakes and not just blame. And I can vouch for the highest integrity of my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary. I don't blame the opposition for 1 minute for doing their job and for probing this matter, because matters of national security are extremely important. But can I give my confidence to the government they've acted proportionately in this matter?
I thank my right honourable friend for the question. Yes, he's absolutely right. There were circumstances in other administrations in which the right honourable lady played a prominent part of members of the government making mistakes and then being brought back themselves into the same administration. I think if people have made a mistake, if they've accepted they've made a mistake, if they have stepped down as a result of that mistake, that does enable them at a future point to be re-employed if they've got a good job to do. And my right honourable and learned friend has an important job to do.
SNP spokesperson Stuart C. Bagdon.
Mr Speaker, new Prime Minister, same old Tories. A government, just like its predecessors, that clearly does not think the ministerial code is worth the paper it's written on. This appointment is an absolute disgrace. So many questions, quite simply, have not been answered. How many so-called errors of judgment have there been? Do ministers behave like this all the time, as one source close to the Home Secretary apparently said? Did the Cabinet Office raise concerns prior to this particular breach? And who first alerted officials to that breach? Who is undertaking an inquiry? Will there finally be an independent ethics advisor? And isn't it shocking that there isn't one just now? But as the Minister acknowledged, Mr Speaker, the real question here is for the Prime Minister, because there are a million other reasons why the Home Secretary is unfit for office, from trashing the Office of Attorney General to our refugee bashing policies, from our trash talk of Benefit Street to advocating withdrawal from ECHR, from our anti-migration, anti-growth policies to being the last defender of tax cuts for the rich, and then there is a Rwanda dream. Mr Speaker, how can the Prime Minister ever talk again about integrity and compassion in politics after blatantly making an appointment in his own interest, but which is completely against everybody else's interests? Actions speak louder than words, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I have to reiterate my right honourable learned friend made a mistake. She acknowledged that. She stepped down and she's been reported. But the honourable gentleman does raise an important point, and I'm glad he has, about the independent adviser. He'll be reassured that I know it is absolutely the Prime Minister's intention to appoint an independent adviser, the right thing to do, and I know that is absolutely my right honourable friend's intention.
Sir Desmond Swing.
Last week, the Home Secretary's sharing of a draft parliamentary answer barely got a mention. They were all over it because this was a damaging policy row with the Prime Minister's subordinate. She lost her Home Secretary. Why does he think that's changed?
The former Prime Minister lost her Home Secretary because the Home Secretary recognised she had made a mistake. She accepted that mistake and she offered to resign, and that resignation was accepted. I don't think that means that a mistake should hang over someone for the rest of their career. There is the opportunity for redemption, and the Prime Minister has decided that that would be an appropriate appointment. I know he is working hard with the Home Secretary on the immense challenges that we face.
Ben Bradshaw.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's notable how much support the Home Secretary has on the benches opposite. She did immense damage. She did immense damage in her previous brief tenure in the job to our relations with India. with her comments about Indian visitors overstaying their visas. The consequence of which means that now the British people are the only people in Europe who don't have access to e-visas to visit India. That's doing great damage to our tourism sector and jeopardising the travel plans of thousands of British families. Would he use his good offices, please, in the Cabinet Office to bang heads together in government, get this sorted out and try to repair the damage the Home Secretary did when she was in the job last time?
Mr. Speaker, our relationship with India is clearly important. I know the right honourable gentleman would not expect me to go into detail about that, and I note from the ticker that we have a question to follow. I'm sure he'll be making that, using that opportunity to make the points that he is making today.
Robert Holford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given the reappointment of the Home Secretary and what the Prime Minister said about 50,000 more police officers, will he make sure, working with the Home Secretary, that we get more of those police officers in Harlow on the beat, which is what our residents want?
My right honourable friend will be aware that I'm not the policing minister. Had I been the policing minister, I'm sure I would have talked about operational independence of the police, but what I'm proud to say on behalf of the government is there is actually well over 15,000 new police officers, additional police officers. That is a tremendous step forward, and with those extra resources, the police operationally can make use of them as they wish. I'm sure they'll have heard my right honourable friend.
Angela Lee.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. The Ministerial Code has been honoured, it seems to me, more in the breach than in the observance in the last period of multiple governments and the clown show that we've seen operating on the party government benches. The Minister says that the new Prime Minister is going to appoint an independent advisor on the Ministerial Code. Can he give this House an assurance that when that appointment is made, and we expect it to be soon, that there will be a proper investigation into the behaviour of the Home Secretary in her last iteration before she had her 6 days off?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I say, I reaffirm the point I made that the Prime Minister is keen to appoint an independent adviser. But I have to say events in the last administration would not be properly part of the remit of the new independent adviser. That was a matter that was dealt with under the previous administration, that we have a new administration, and the Home Secretary has been appointed to her post.
Alistair Cummer.
Appointment by this Prime Minister of a Home Secretary is not something relating to the previous administration, Mr. Speaker. If the Minister is correct in his assertion that there is nothing improper or inappropriate about this appointment, then surely it will be in the Prime Minister and his government's own interests to have the independent adviser on the ministerial code run the rule over it once he or she is appointed.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the right honourable gentleman, I don't think there's any mysteries here. The fact is that a mistake was made. The Home Secretary accepted she made a mistake. She accepted that. She informed the relevant parties, and her resignation was accepted. So I don't see the grounds under which there would be any utility in the independent adviser going back over past ground.
Cavan Jones.
Can I ask the Minister, does the Home Secretary have full security clearance, including access to the most classified information?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I would not be able to comment on any matters of security. That's not a no. I would only. The right honourable gentleman knows me well. He knows that I would not say anything in front of this House that I don't know. So I do not know what the security clearance is of the Home Secretary. But what I do know is the Home Secretary is in the Home Office doing her job, acting as Home Secretary, doing the right things we need to keep our borders secure, and that includes all aspects of counter-terrorism and the full remit of the role of the Home Secretary.
Samuel Wilson.
Mr. Speaker. Can I congratulate the Home Secretary on her appointment and wish her well in a very difficult job. The fact that she made a mistake and confessed to making a mistake and said she was sorry for making the mistake, and then took the honourable decision to step down from her job, is not unique in this, and then was reappointed. That's not unique in this House. There's not a party in this House that hasn't reappointed somebody. The ministerial position in circumstances like that, or even worse. I think that the real judgment we'll make on the Home Secretary will be whether or not she tackles crime in our streets. Does she deal with those protesters who are defacing our artworks and disrupting our streets? And does she take on the criminal gangs who are ruthlessly exploiting those desperate immigrants who are trying to get into our country?
Minister.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his characteristically fresh approach, because a lot of people, I think, in this House could remember the fact that many people have been appointed within their respective parties who've made mistakes, who've accepted those mistakes, and who are prepared to make a fresh start. And I thank him for his openness in saying that and reminding us that that is the case across this House. And I agree, the real challenges are the challenges that face this country in the years ahead, and the Home Secretary is hard at work getting on with it.
Dame Diana Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister has talked a lot about accountability today, and the Home Affairs Select Committee has an important role in scrutinising and questioning the Home Secretary and her policies. We haven't been able to do that since, I think, February the 2nd of this year. And in terms of accountability and making this place work properly, we need Home Secretaries and Ministers to come before the Home Affairs Select Committee. So can the Minister just confirm that the Home Secretary, as she now is, back, she will appear before the Home Affairs Select Committee, as will all her ministers, because this morning we heard some very disturbing evidence about the chaos that currently exists within the immigration system in this country.
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I clearly can't make commitments on behalf of my fellow ministers, but it's a long-established practice of this House that ministers make themselves available, and I've got no doubt that my ministerial colleagues will be very, very worried about it.
Andy Slaughter.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister's defence of the Home Secretary reminds me of the old saying, the louder he talked of his honour, the faster we counted our spoons. But can he tell me, given the Prime Minister said a few moments ago that the Right Honourable for South Staffordshire was reappointed to the Cabinet despite his leaking of confidential data, because that was 4 years ago. This is 6 days ago. What's the minimum period for punishment now, or for rehabilitation, for breach of the ministerial code?
Minister.
I'm sure the honourable gentleman understands that if people have made a mistake and accept they've made a mistake, then a Prime Minister is entitled to look again, to re-evaluate what the circumstances were and decide whether or not it would be appropriate for a person to serve in office. And that may be the case after a few days, or after a few months, or after a few years. The question is on the circumstances of the case. And in these circumstances, in the circumstances of my right honourable learned friend, the Prime Minister has chosen to invite her back into the government.
Hal Williams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Is there a published tariff for offending Cabinet Ministers, possibly a period of restorative justice, remission for good behaviour, perhaps even probation options, or is it just a matter of political convenience?
Minister.
Well, it does, Madam Deputy Speaker, depend on the circumstances of the time. And it's very important, if someone says that they made a mistake, that the mistake they've made is looked at in the context of the ministerial code, and that has a range of sanctions. And I think we all know in this House that we serve, and we do our utmost, and actually to admit to a mistake, to have that recognised and have that sanction is in itself a serious matter, as I'm sure the honourable gentleman would agree.
Dame Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We all know mistakes happen, but, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Minister talks about though it's a junior member of staff who's made an inadvertent clerical error. This was the Home Secretary who released secret information through a personal email address. It suggests a pattern of behaviour that she thinks it's okay to snap on her phone and do that at 4 in the morning and make this atrocious mistake. This is much more serious than the Minister is trying to paint it. I had the privilege of serving in this Home Office. It would never have happened under previous governments. Will the Minister not demean himself any further and recognise honestly to this House that this is in a different scale than the way he's trying to present it?
Minister.
I'm not certain if I'm trying to present it in any way, Madam Deputy Speaker, other than the facts that we know, and they are contained within the resignation letter of my right honourable learned friends, who set out that she had made a mistake and she apologised for the mistake that she had made. And clearly the Prime Minister has taken a view. The Home Secretary has returned to government and has a task ahead of her.
Ali.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Would the Minister confirm under this Prime Minister, and who knows how long he's going to be in the office for, that the ministerial code will be updated to say as long as you acknowledge and recognise your mistake, that you can be reappointed immediately?
The ministerial code was last updated in May of this year. I very much doubt there's any further update likely to come. The ministerial code ensured that it did say, we made it clearer after a recommendation from the Committee for Standards in Public Life, that it's not the case that every single breach of the ministerial code should result in a resignation or dismissal, that there are appropriate measures that need to be put in place depending on the circumstances of the case.
Wendy Chamberlain.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In other workplaces, when somebody returns to work following a data breach, inadvertent or otherwise, there is a risk assessment carried out. So can I ask, what risk assessment is the Home Office carrying out to ensure these things don't happen again? And indeed, what assurances is the Home Secretary giving to ensure that she does not engage in this behaviour again?
Minister.
Look, I'm absolutely certain that the Home Secretary is clearly very, very aware that she has made a mistake, very aware that this cannot be ever repeated, and I think it's a salutary lesson not only for her but for everyone else who is privileged to serve in government, that we need to be extraordinarily careful on these matters. So I think we should leave it there. She knows what she needs to do for the future, and she knows that she has to ensure that there is no such repetition, but she will focus on her proper role, which is to ensure the safety of this country and the future of the police.
Clive Efford.
The role of Home Secretary has major security implications for our country. So does the Minister accept that a Home Secretary that doesn't have full security clearance cannot do the job?
I don't know where.
Minister.
I don't know where the honourable gentleman has got the concept of people not having full security clearance. I don't understand where that would come from. As I've already said, the Home Secretary is doing the job of the Home Secretary with all of that entails. So I hope that reassures the honourable gentleman.
Phil Clark.
Deputy Speaker, can the Minister tell us whether anyone in government, including the members of the Cabinet, are using personal email accounts to conduct government business?
By and large, there is you use government communications to conduct government business, but as I understand it, that's not a total and complete ban. There will be certain circumstances when things are nugatory, where there may be circumstances where other forms of communication. We all live in a digital age. We need to have very, very rapid communications. And as the Honourable Lady will be aware, there is a whole range of communications that are legitimately entered into by ministers, including in relation to their constituency or in relation to political issues, that cannot be conducted and should not be conducted on government mechanisms.
Wayne Davis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last week, the Cabinet Office Minister, who's in his place, said very clearly to myself in response to a question and other members that there had been a significant security breach by the Home Secretary and this had led to her resignation. And yet the Home Secretary had inferred that the real reason for her dismissal was a blazing row between her and the then Prime Minister. This was clearly not the case and not the reason for her departing government. What does this say about the Home Secretary and the new Prime Minister?
Minister.
The Honourable Gentleman will forgive me if I look for the text as to the rationale for my right honourable and learned friend's departure in the text of her resignation letter, where she made it absolutely clear that she had made a mistake and that she was sorry she had made a mistake, and she felt it was appropriate in those circumstances to tender her resignation.
Vera Hobhouse. Deputy Speaker, can I ask again, is a simple apology now enough for anybody who breaches the ministerial code and gets reinstated after 6 days without any inquiry?
Yeah.
Minister.
I think it really does depend on the circumstances, and it really does depend on what has happened, and it really does depend on what other methods can be used to sanction the member of the government concerned. So there may well be circumstances, as is stated in the ministerial code, where some sanction other than resignation or dismissal is appropriate.
Florence Eshalomi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I've listened to the Minister this morning outline that the Home Secretary has apologised and she's been reappointed. We have a situation where there are 6 police authorities that are in special measures. We have a situation where in some parts of the country trust and confidence in the police is at an all-time low, but yet we want these same officers to go out and arrest criminals and uphold the law. Does the Minister not recognise that having a Home Secretary who's broken a law, something so serious, who may not then command the trust and confidence in those same very police officers?
Minister.
I think the Honourable Lady would have said that there's no suggestion here of a breach of the law. There was a mistake made by the Home Secretary, something which she has accepted and she has apologised for. And I'm sorry that there's very little to add to that. She is determined, as we all are, to give the police the powers they need and the resources they need to go after the criminals which the Honourable Lady referred to. And I think she will welcome, as I do, the fact we've now got 15,000 additional police officers.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Minister very much for his responses to the questions. Can I say this very gently, rather than focusing upon political point scoring, can we instead focus upon political solutions? Can I ask the Minister this question? Can he give an indication of when government will outline fresh plans as to how this government, our government, will address the issue of illegal channel crossings that put lives in danger each day and week, and our services at our breaking point to help those migrants who seek a better future?
Minister.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for reminding us of the real issues that underpin this administration and are affecting our country. I'm not going to set out a timetable for the Honourable Gentleman, that's for others to do. But I absolutely recognise the pith of his comments. There are really important challenges that we need to get after. That is right there amongst them. And I've got absolute confidence that the Home Secretary and the Minister for Immigration are working on that night and day to get us the results that we need.
I thank the Minister for answering the urgent question. We now have urgent question, Nick Thomas-Symonds.
To ask the Secretary of State for International Trade if she will make a statement on progress on the UK-India free trade deal.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I first say that it's good to be back at the Department for International Trade. Can I say that India is, of course, an economic superpower, projected to be the world's 3rd largest economy by the year 2050. Improving access to this dynamic market will provide huge opportunities for UK businesses, building on a trading relationship worth more than £24 billion sterling in 2021. That's why we are negotiating an ambitious free trade agreement that works for both countries. We have already closed the majority of chapters and look forward to the next round of talks shortly. A strong FTA can strengthen the economic links between the UK and India, boosting the UK economy by more than £3 billion by 2035, helping families and communities. An FTA can cut red tape, making it cheaper for UK companies to sell into India's dynamic market, helping drive growth and support jobs across every nation and region of the UK. Greater access could help UK businesses reach over 1 billion more consumers, including India's growing middle class, estimated to reach $250 million by the year 2050, and give them a competitive edge over other countries that don't have a deal with India. An FTA with India supports the government's growth strategy by taking advantage of the United Kingdom's status as an independent trading nation, championing free trade that benefits the whole of the UK. We remain clear that we are working towards the best deal for both sides and won't sign until we have a deal that is fair, reciprocal and ultimately in the best interests of the British people and the UK economy.
Shadow Secretary of State Nick Thomas-Symonds.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome the Minister back to the Department once again? Wish him well and thank him for his response. And I'm grateful to Mr Speaker for granting this urgent question. Not only is Diwali this year an important celebration, it also marks another milestone. In January of this year, negotiations on the UK-India trade deal began, with the government promising to conclude these talks by Diwali this week. Under this government, economic growth has been virtually non-existent, and promised progress on new trade deals has not materialised. They are all talk and no delivery, Madam Deputy Speaker. An agreement with India would not only be potentially worth billions of pounds to the UK economy and provide new markets for exporters, it would also offer the opportunity to advance key areas of shared interest. And on these benches, we have also been clear that it should also be an opportunity to raise issues like workers' rights, environmental and climate standards. But it appears that progress on trade talks have stalled, yet another product of Conservative infighting. Members across the House will be well aware of the comments on overstaying visas made by the Home Secretary that have caused such offence. So does the Minister agree with me that the Home Secretary has completely undermined the UK Government's negotiating position? Can he confirm if she will be withdrawing those comments? Has a future target date for completion of the deal been agreed, or is this destined to be kicked into the long grass along with the promised United States deal? And does the Minister acknowledge that the delay in this deal and the US deal means there is no prospect whatsoever of the Conservative Party meeting its manifesto aim of 80% of trade being covered by free trade agreements by the end of the year? And does the Minister not accept the very simple truth that on trade the Conservatives have quite simply broken their promises?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm delighted to have the opportunity to answer this urgent question and to answer some of the points that the honourable gentleman just raised. I will answer all of them. First one, on his question about the end of the deal. We have been clear that we have concluded, as we said we would, the majority of the chapters of the deal. 16 chapters across 26 policy areas have been agreed so far, Madam Deputy Speaker. He will know that after the end of each round of negotiations, there has been a written ministerial statement tabled in this place that he can study. Secondly, he asks about visas, and I think he's perhaps trying to have a second grab, the relation to the Home Secretary, which we've just heard another UQ on. I'm not sure if the Shadow Cabinet, Madam Deputy Speaker, are properly coordinating their UQs, but he should know in the area of trade that what we're talking about are Mode 4 arrangements. These aren't immigration arrangements. These relate to business visas, not for permanent settlement. And in terms of the Mode 4 arrangements, Madam Deputy Speaker, that remains an area of active negotiation. And then finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, he said that this government is all talk and no delivery when it comes on trade. And that was the thing that amazed me the most, because he's obscuring the bigger issue here for the opposition. Assuming we get a good deal for Britain on this deal, assuming we get a good deal elsewhere, as we have, for example, on Japan, on Australia and New Zealand. Now, I've been away from the department for a year, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I've yet to find in that year Labour supporting a single trade deal that has been undertaken by this government. They didn't support Japan. They were against the Singapore deal. They split 3 ways on Canada. And only last month, on Australia and New Zealand, they abstained as well. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is this government that is delivering on trade. It is the opposition that are in chaos and confusion. They have been unable to support a single trade deal to date, and it sounds like they won't be supporting this one either.
Anne-Marie Trevelyan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to commend my right honourable friend for taking this UQ. It's a pleasure to have a moment to pop down and be able to just add my voice to the really important point, which is this deal was commenced earlier this year. I had the privilege of launching it, and the Indian Prime Minister and we set ourselves a chance to really try and have the clarity of what a deal could look like between our two nations by Diwali. And I'm very pleased to hear that progress has been made across that. I think what's so important is to understand the value that this brings, not only because the diaspora in India is such an important part of our economy, and they have been incredibly important in driving what we try to achieve, but because so many British businesses are really excited at seeing some of those barriers come down. So perhaps I would be really pleased to hear from my friend what those key areas, particularly around the innovation of British businesses, will bring as this deal crystallises in the weeks ahead.
Well, Madam Deputy, can I first of all thank her for the incredible service that she did at the Department for International Trade over the last year as Secretary of State, moving things forward in so many areas, crucially this area. When I left the department, the idea of an India trade deal was really, I think, just a concept rather than something that was very material. And 5 rounds of negotiations later, she is right. We are in a good place. Certainly, we expect the deal to do a lot on tariffs. Many of our exporters are facing really considerable tariffs on services, professional, financial, legal. I can't promise we're going to get everything in the deal. IP, easier for companies to work through innovation and so on, investment, life sciences. There are a huge number of areas of potential gain for India. I welcome her support, and perhaps the opposition might take that as a lesson to perhaps begin to start to support a trade deal in the future. Madam Deputy Speaker.
SNP spokesperson Drew Hendry.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I think welcoming a minister back to his place is now a standard response, but I welcome him back to his place. Increased trade and ties and cooperation are to be welcome between India and the UK, and that's especially so in Scotland. But this should not be at the expense of human and workers' rights. So will the minister belatedly guarantee that issues over human rights, environmental, health and safety, along with climate and equality concerns, are fully resolved before any deal is signed? And does he really believe that there is no anger, no problem over the Home Secretary's comments in India that might cause problems for this deal? Scotch whisky exports to India are already subject to 150% tariffs. New Delhi has threatened even higher tariffs on whisky and gin in retaliation for domestic steel protections. Whisky and gin producers need to know that the UK government is doing something to drastically reduce these tariffs. So what is going on? And what will be done to ensure barriers aren't just replaced at Indian state level? Finally, Jaktar Singh Johel remains in an Indian prison without trial, detained since 2017. The UK has now had 4 Prime Ministers and 5 Foreign Secretaries since his illegal detention. What is he doing during negotiations to right this wrong?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank him for that list of questions. First of all, as ever, the UK's commitment to workers' rights in our trade deals and our trade negotiations, in all of our international talks, remains completely undiminished. That is absolutely a fundamental thing for this country. I'm glad that he raised whisky tariffs, Madam Deputy Speaker, because he didn't support the Australia free trade deal, which would see a reduction in whisky tariffs. There's actually 150%, 150% tariffs on Scotch whisky currently going into India. So I will be watching very closely indeed to see what his approach will be to this trade deal. And I also noticed, Madam Deputy Speaker, with our very successful removal of the Airbus-Boeing tariffs, which was a huge benefit to the Scotch whisky industry, I wasn't quite sure whether he was fully supportive of that either. He raises human rights issues, and at all times the Foreign Office is engaging very vigorously on the case mentioned and other cases mentioned as well. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, I will just end with the SNP, because when it comes to trade deals, Madam Deputy Speaker, they are even worse than Labour. They have never supported any trade deal ever concluded either by the EU or by the UK. They didn't even support the trade deal between the EU and the UK and voted for no deal 2 years ago. Madam Deputy Speaker, they were against Canada, against Korea, against South Africa. They didn't even support the trade deal between the EU and the Ukraine. Madam Deputy Speaker. Can you get that? They didn't even support the EU-Ukraine deal, abstained as well on Japan and on Singapore. This is a party which is fundamentally against trade and fundamentally against the interests of Scotland as a trading nation.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome my right honourable friend back to his place? As someone that's a member of the Scottish Whisky APPG and having the opportunity to work closely with the Scottish Whisky Association, notwithstanding the Minister's previous answer, can he confirm that actually this is a great opportunity for businesses up and down our great country to actually increase their order book and, more importantly, show and work with countries with shared values?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for that question. I think pretty much the first visit of our new Secretary of State, my right honourable friend, the member for Saffron Walden, was to a distillery just a few weeks ago, showing her commitment to our brilliant UK food and drink exporting sectors. He's quite right to raise the exceptionally high levels of tariffs going on whisky and other alcoholic products into India, and that, Madam Deputy Speaker, I cannot guarantee we will deliver the elimination of those tariffs, but if you're not at the table doing those negotiations, I don't think any of the opposition parties seem to think we should be, you won't achieve anything.
Thank you, Madam
Deputy Speaker. This trade deal will be based on the heads of human rights and civil liberties that India doesn't protect for the Christian community, for the Dalit Hindu community, for the Sikh community, for the Muslim community and the Kashmiri community. If we are to go ahead with the trade deal, will he understand that it has to be based on the actions of the Indian government in terms of human rights and civil liberties, and other than that, we shouldn't proceed with it?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, as I said earlier, the UK government has got an exceptionally proud record when it comes to promoting human rights around the world. In my 12 years as a government minister and as a government backbencher in that time, I've always been greatly impressed by the vigour with which this government sets about its support for global human rights. He mentions Kashmir, Madam Deputy Speaker. Of course, the UK government, he's got plenty of opportunity to raise these issues of Foreign Office questions with Foreign Office ministers, but the government's position is unchanged, that it is for India and Pakistan to find a lasting political resolution to the Kashmir dispute. India and Pakistan are long-standing important friends of the UK. We encourage both to engage in dialogue and finding lasting diplomatic solutions to maintaining regional stability.
Anthony Bagnall.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. There is absolutely no pleasing the opposition. They criticise us when we sign our deals too quickly. They criticise us when we take too long. The question is we have to get it absolutely right. And the fact is that this government has signed a deal with Australia, with New Zealand. Negotiations are underway with CPTPP. We're exploring the GCC. We're looking at India. We've done a digital partnership with Singapore. We've done a trade deal with Japan. And we're improving the rollover deals that we took from the European Union. This is what we are doing and delivering. And frankly, we've had this conversation before with the opposition where they don't recognise the very many benefits they bring. Does the Minister agree?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend is a very experienced and dedicated, committed member of the International Trade Committee. He is absolutely right in what he says. And what we see from the opposition, Madam Deputy Speaker, having been in opposition myself now about 17 years ago, Madam Deputy Speaker, to 12 years ago. Actually, what you needed to do, if you were serious about going into government, was to not just be clear about what you're against. They're against trade talks. They're against trade deals. They're against the India trade talk. It's about time they worked out what they are in favour of. What are they for, Madam Deputy Speaker? I think the Shadow Cabinet might have had a better session this afternoon deciding that, rather than tabling more UQs.
Yes. Sarah Green.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The House of Lords International Agreements Committee published its report on the government's negotiating objectives in July. It criticised the negotiating objectives for being very general and high level and said the objectives provided no clue as to the government's negotiating priorities. Can the Minister confirm whether high animal welfare standards are a negotiating priority?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, what happens with a set of trade negotiations is when you set out the negotiation objectives, the scoping assessment, they are by necessity rather general because you haven't actually started negotiating. So you don't actually know what the other side is going to want to achieve in those talks. You haven't actually started discussing any of those issues. So they are by necessity rather general. She asked about animal rights, and she's quite right to raise this as a very, very important part of this government's agenda. But the government's position remains unchanged, that we have very high standards of animal welfare. We will make sure that they are not undermined by any trade agreement. And in any case, this country, we set our animal welfare standards. They aren't set through any trade deal.
Alex Chalk.
Deputy Speaker, does my right honourable friend share my surprise at the opposition foot-dragging on this in circumstances where one of the great prizes with India is legal services? The right honourable gentleman is himself a lawyer. Doesn't this present a great opportunity, given that English law governs so many contracts, for us to progress this vital industry to secure more jobs for lawyers in this country?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, my right honourable friend is absolutely right. Legal services are a really important part of this agenda. I think one of the first meetings I had was with the chair of the Bar Council at this department, Chantal Aimé-Doris, who told me in some detail about some of the gains that could be achieved by getting a good deal with India when it comes to legal services to make sure that our global, high-quality, top-quality legal services are appreciated right the way across the world.
Ben Bradshaw.
It would be easy to do trade and commerce with India if it was easy to travel there. And as I'm sure he is aware, the British are the only nationality in Europe who are currently barred from India's e-tourist visa system. We always used to be able to get e-visas for India. Following the Home Secretary's remarks, we no longer can. This is doing great damage, as we've heard on the Transport Committee, to our travel industry, to the Indian tourism industry, and to thousands of British families whose plans to travel to India are now in jeopardy. Would he use his good offices across government to get this issue resolved in advance of any trade deal? This is real damage that's being done now.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, we take, of course, an ongoing interest in the ability of our citizens to travel abroad and to access other countries. But I would again stress that a trade negotiation covers what's called Mode 4, movement of people, i.e. business visas. And there I'm confident that we can get a good deal with India when it comes to Mode 4.
Jerome Mayhew.
Madam Deputy Speaker, thank you. Does my right honourable friend agree that this is an exciting opportunity to help unlock the economic potential of the living bridge that Prime Minister Modi has recently described? And as for the notional timeline of Diwali, does he also agree that getting the right deal is much more important than getting any deal?
My honourable friend is absolutely right, Madam Deputy Speaker. First of all, we have a brilliant diaspora community in this country. I was delighted to celebrate Diwali a little bit early, I have to say, last week with the India Forum, the India Global Forum, but that was a really telling example of the strength of the diaspora deal. But he's also quite right that it's more important the contents and the depth and breadth of the deal rather than the date at which it is delivered. And that is the case, I might add, Madam Deputy Speaker, for all trade negotiations. It is not a question of getting a quick deal, it is a question of getting the best deal for Britain, which is exactly what we've done with Japan, exactly what we've done with Australia, and exactly what we've done with New Zealand.
Paul Girvan.
Thank you. My honourable colleague on the committee has made mention about the trade deals that we have already signed and the progress that has been made on others. As a committee, we've had some concerns about when trade deals are being presented to the committee in a timely fashion for scrutiny and detail. I don't wish to actually hold up a deal being made, but we understand that it sometimes can be important to get it done in a timely fashion. Can we have any indication as to when a deal will be put together that will be able to be presented to the committee?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm not going to set a deadline today for this negotiation which is ongoing. But can I commend him on one thing, apart from his work on the committee, that I think it was the Democratic Unionist Party that voted with the government on the Australia and New Zealand trade deal. It's nice to see an opposition party, Madam Deputy Speaker, that is willing to take a constructive approach when it comes to what the government is proposing, if it is in the UK and Northern Ireland interests. So I would absolutely commend him on that. When it comes to interaction with MPs, I did an MPs briefing just last week on the India trade deal. I've mentioned that we've done written ministerial statements after each round of negotiations. The Secretary of State, my right honourable friend, will be appearing before the ITC, I believe, on the 30th of November as an introductory hearing, which I'm sure this will crop up as well.
Scott Benton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the government's efforts to secure a free trade deal with India and the growth, jobs and investment this will help to create. However, the Minister will be aware of our manifesto commitments to reduce net migration and the perception among many of my constituents that we are not succeeding in this aim. Can the Minister reassure the House that in seeking to boost economic growth, he will also balance this against abiding by our manifesto commitments throughout these negotiations?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister has been absolutely clear about the importance of our manifesto commitments. But I would remind him, as I reminded the whole House, that this deal is not about immigration. It is about mode for business visas, which I think is going to be really important for both countries to continue doing as trade, particularly services trade, the sort of thing mentioned by my honourable friend, the member for Cheltenham, in terms of legal services, being able to make sure that our professionals can get into the Indian market to actually deliver their fantastic world-leading services.
Sarah Owen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can the Minister please confirm on this and any other trade deal that during negotiations, vital issues such as human rights, workers' rights, and especially women's rights and environmental standards have not only been discussed, but guarantees have been secured? And would he be able to share what those guarantees are?
Yeah, thank you for that question, and she is right to raise these issues. But I would repeat what I said earlier, that the UK is very proud of our standards, very proud of the work that we do around the world on these really important questions. And these are questions, these are issues that are raised with India and with all of our partners at all times.
Tahir Ali.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister will not be oblivious to the human rights record of the Indian Prime Minister Modi and his government, given the atrocities being carried out against ethnic communities across India, namely the Christians and the Sikh community. Also, its revocation of Article 370 and 35A in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Will the Minister categorically give us the assurances that no trade agreement will go ahead until India meets its obligations under international law and many of the United Nations outstanding commitments that it needs to fulfil?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I've already talked about Kashmir and the government's commitment to finding a resolution of that issue, working peacefully and with the two governments coming together. Can I just return to the case raised by the member for Inverness on Jagtar Singh Johal, just to add a little bit of detail on that important human rights case. The FCDO and the government have consistently raised our concerns about Mr Johal's case directly with the government of India. I believe our then Prime Minister raised it with Prime Minister Modi earlier this year as well.
Robert Halfon.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I strongly welcome the progress the government has made on this deal. I think it's incredibly important. We have a thriving Indian community in Harlow, and I hope my right honourable friend can wish them a happy Diwali. Could I just ask him, when we sign these deals, to make sure that it isn't just the big multinationals in the UK that benefit, and that he goes directly with information to smaller companies like the many smaller businesses in my constituency of Harlow, so they can benefit from these wonderful trade deals as well?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I certainly join him in wishing all of his constituents in Harlow a happy Diwali. It's a fantastic time for that festival to come to this country and to India at this particularly appropriate moment. He mentioned making sure the trade deals work just not for multinationals but for SMEs, and again, he is absolutely right. The UK is an SME-led economy. It would be strongly in our interest to make sure that all trade deals work for SMEs. That is why it's typically our practice to negotiate an SME chapter in our trade deals to make sure that SMEs, which don't always have the resources to wade through a 1,000-page plus free trade agreement document, that they are given headers and pointers as to how that deal will help benefit them.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister for his response to the questions and declare an interest as the Chair of the APPG for freedom of religious belief. With increased violations against 4 issues in India, systematic disenfranchisement of those of Christian and Muslim faith, does the Minister agree with me that human rights provision must be included in the India trade deal? And can he guarantee that no blind eye will be turned to human rights abuses for the sake of economic benefit?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think this government has got a fantastic record promoting religious tolerance, religious diversity abroad. The current Chancellor, when he was Foreign Secretary, made that as one of his key early launch pads when he was Foreign Secretary in this government. I might add, Madam Deputy Speaker, the British High Commission in New Delhi and our Deputy High Commissions right the way across India regularly meet with religious representatives and have run projects supporting minority rights. It is a big part of what the UK presence on the ground in India is all about.
I thank the Minister for answering the urgent question, and we now come to presentation of Bill. Sir Ed Davey.
General election date bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday the 18th of November.
Friday the 18th of November. Thank you. Presentation of Bill. Rachel Maskell.
Former Ministers and Prime Ministers Abolition of Payments Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday the 9th of December.
Friday the 9th of December. Thank you. We now come to the 10-minute rule motion. Robert Halfon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to provide for maximum waiting times for customers who are contacting providers of utilities and certain other services by telephone, to require such companies to ensure that customers can speak to a person within that maximum waiting time, to restrict the use of automated menus on telephone services offered by such companies, to provide for financial penalties for companies that fail to meet these standards, and for connected purposes. I would like to first say how pleased I've been to work with the Daily Mail and Money Mail, specifically Helena Kelly and Tilly Armstrong, to support the Money Mail Pick Up or Pay Up campaign. How often do you hear the dreaded phrase, "Sorry, we're rather busy right now, but your call is important to us. Please hold the line"? How often do you have to wait 15, 20, 30, 45 minutes plus on the phone to get through, and that's spending the first 5 minutes being asked to press 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6? And how often do you have to wait all that time to get through, and then they just cut you off? So you have to start this whole horrific process all over again. These companies, big multinationals with chief executives earning huge salaries, have created a Kafkaesque torture chamber of customer service. And it's happening every day across the United Kingdom, and has been for some time now, as families all over Britain are trying to contact their utility company or service providers. Customer service providers plummeted during the pandemic as companies grappled with the new work guidelines put in place. Yet, they still have not recovered. And worst, some of these companies are using this as an excuse, despite most workplaces having returned to normal. According to Citizens Advice, customer service ratings for energy firms, for example, are the worst they have been since 2017, with the highest performing suppliers scoring less than 60% for customer satisfaction. These ratings, as they themselves admit, are due to these egregiously long waiting times, yet seemingly no action has been taken to rectify this terrible quality of service for essential needs. In fact, consumer-facing service providers seem to be finding any way to avoid blame or accountability, to the point where Now TV, talking to a member of my office, claimed that the death of Her late Majesty the Queen was the reason for potential waiting times. as the saying goes, you couldn't make it up. And often by the time you surpass such messages and click all the right buttons, you're then told by an automated voice that in fact the best route is to go via an online portal or text chat, despite already having been on hold for 20 minutes. Oh, and that's if you're even lucky enough to find the contact details needed. Moneymail and the Daily Mail discovered that the telecoms giants and energy suppliers are burying their telephone numbers on obscure pages of their websites to deter customers from calling for help. This is unacceptable. And it doesn't even take into account vulnerable or elderly customers who either don't have access to computers or simply don't have the tools to use one. One 80-year-old reader told the Daily Mail that they do not have a smartphone, and as such, they're frustrated about making calls to providers where an automated voice asks them questions which they can't answer with their phone. My office colleague that I mentioned, trying to purchase a Now TV broadband package, did not have the broadband connected after 2 months, as they were told, incredibly, that their complaint about a delay had in fact caused a further delay to their service. Yet there are of course no consequences for increasingly anxious and frustrated consumers across Britain. And that's why we have to have financial penalties for large utility and service providers, much like the precedent that's been set in Spain. The new Spanish consumer laws will force big companies and utility firms to answer calls within 3 minutes or face fines of up to £85,000. Consumers will also have the right to be put through to a human on the phone rather than having to deal with an automated system. So we need a similar law in the United Kingdom. First, ensuring that no one would have to wait longer than at least 10 minutes on the phone, and that's pretty generous. Every customer would get through to a real human being as opposed to an automated machine or robot. Companies would remove the 1, 2, 3 options, which are all about trying to get customers off the phone instead of actually talking to them. Should businesses fail to meet these standards, they'll be fined heavily, and this money would be paid back to the customer through rebates. We're in a cost of living crisis. Consumers need easy and accessible customer service from their energy and utility providers. Companies like